Welcome to the Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to the Girl Dad Show, a professional parenting podcast. Each month, I interview entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals who are balancing parenthood, life, and profession in the hopes to learn what it takes to be an amazing professional parent. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. Today I had Jeff Jensen on the show, and we talk about his journey living in all sorts of countries and all across the country, and how he has navigated a Ph.D. in electromagnetic studies to being a software CTO, and now starting his own company and disrupting the pool industry. I met Jeff by being in the pool industry, and we have bonded very, very quickly, and I just love his perspective on life. And it was really, really great to unpack his thought process on raising two daughters and how he thinks about taking risk and building his new startup while he's building his family. I count Jeff as one of the top 10 smartest people I know in my network, and he is just a very, very thoughtful and awesome man, and I hope that you enjoy the show and learn a lot like I did. Thank you. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on the Girl Dad Show today.
I know. We finally made it. We've talked about it for a bit, and we promised not to talk pools as well the whole time. So let's do it. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad we're here, and I'm okay talking about pools, but I do want to make sure we also talk about kids. But before we get into that, though, let's actually tell the listeners what you do for a living. Yeah. So why don't you start there?
Definitely. So I've been entrepreneur probably last 7-8 years. A couple of different startups, but I'm always, I guess, the techie guy. So never the CEO, always the CTO, kind of like always a bridesmaid, maybe never the bride type of mentality. But
that's an awesome analogy. That's hilarious.
For those listening, yeah, I mean, I've graduated A&M background, so go Aggies, Gig'em, electrical engineering, computer scientist, love programming, love tinkering, love hardware. And then currently, have a startup in the pool industry that we're super excited about. You and I connected on that.
Heck yeah.
And then do consulting and work for a couple of other startups in Houston, one in the oil and gas space, and a couple of others in IoT hardware software. So, yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's like very understated the way you just said it, because it's actually much more impressive than that. But I'll let you get away with just saying it.
I feel like if you over introduce yourself, then people are just like, oh, who's this guy? And I mean, everyone works hard, right? Everyone works hard, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think you've had a very unique set of experiences and skills that have allowed you to have some unique experiences and able to build a lot of cool things, right? And so I think you're definitely unique beyond measure. I would say that if I had to count in my hand the 10 smartest people I know, you'd definitely be in that list. So.
Oh, I appreciate it. Oh, thanks. So, well, that's flattering. Now I'm gonna look, I'm already red, or maybe it's just my my camera. But no, I mean, look, I love. I think I'm most passionate. If people say, "What do you do?" or "What defines you?" Certainly my family, my kids, but I love building stuff. Like I love being ground zero, building something from scratch, especially tech. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of where I started to really have an affinity for you, relationally, is when, I realized that you had the same problem I had with our pool service provider, and we both kind of had this need to figure it out and figure out.
Well, but you, I feel, took it the extra mile. And we're just like, oh, I'm gonna start a pool company and just do it better than everybody else. I mean, I remember when we connected in Austin, and I think it was either Robert Peroni or somebody else connected us.
That's right.
And, I didn't he said, well, there's another entrepreneur in the pool space. And I was like, no way. Cause I know everybody. It's so small. But then it was awesome. You're like, well, I have this big vision, big dream for starting this company. And I'm really great at ops and all this other stuff. And then you told me when we connected a couple of weeks ago, how much you've grown. I mean, man, you're running a masterclass in the pool industry right now. So.
Well, thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. It's so funny because I love that you think about it that way, because for me, you think about technology that way is your background, but for me, operations is my background. And so it's just commonplace for me where I look at the stuff that you're building in the pool industry and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to completely disrupt an entire industry. And it's so funny. It's so funny to me.
I mean, but from that sense, and in your mind, have your ops experiences translated like directly, or like a lot of people have said. So as an example, I met a couple of entrepreneurs 2 years ago in Houston. I
Mhm.
think they started, I believe the brewery was like Yellow Rose, or there's one of these ones in
Cool
Houston.
name.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I met them. They exited and then they were like, hey, let's go. So their mindset was like, we really mastered how to have 1099s, highly, transitional people working and working out. And they said that they really developed a blueprint, like working at this brewery.
Hmm.
And they felt that that would translate to the pool space. And I was talking with them and they were like, we were completely wrong. Like
Yeah.
any playbook we thought we had. So I'm just curious, like, how's your experiences from like big corporate and all the other stuff you told me you've done? Has it
Yeah.
translated, or are you finding you have to be more innovative with what you're doing?
A lot of it's translated. A lot of it's translated, and I think that it is more around the ability to adapt, though. Like, I think the startup experience has really helped me in the pool industry because the pool industry is very different. It's very different than the coffee industry. It's very different than the pest control industry. It's like there's like this steep learning curve because you have to get people somewhat chemistry trained. Like they have to have some knowledge of chemistry that's actually pretty
Yeah.
advanced, right? It's not like crazy advanced, but it's
If you're gonna
advanced
do it,
enough.
if you're gonna do it well, I mean, if you're gonna do it
That's okay.
well.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thanks for that qualification. Thanks for the
Yeah.
qualification. Yes. If you're going to do it well, you have to like learn a little bit and then it gets steep, right? And then once you learn it, then it's like, it's kind of easy and straightforward and then it drops down again. And then when you start doing repairs and fixes, the hardware is so like fragmented. And I know you know this and it's like
Yeah.
one of your main issues, but the hardware and the equipment is so fragmented and quite outdated. And so you actually need like some level of, again, steep learning curve. It's like you need to learn some basic plumbing, you need to learn some basic electricity, you need to learn some basic coding. And so there's like these two little dips that happen that is not normal in most operations. You know, it's like usually a graduated learning curve like this, and you just get really good.
Yeah.
And then by the time the 3 or 6 month comes in, people get good. Here it's like it's a ramp up for 6 months and then it drops, and then it's a ramp up for 6 months and then it drops again, right? And so
Yeah, or I would say you just throw people in the deep end with the pool pun intended. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then the the cons of that, there's just a lot of things that you have to operationalize. So it's very different. It's a really fun space for that reason because operationally it's like the most challenging problem to solve because there's all these weird little quirks that most businesses don't have.
yeah.
And so I love it. I freaking love it. It's so fun. I
I
can't
mean,
stop.
and you and I talked. I think the interesting piece, about translating like your different skill sets, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've heard of other entrepreneurs, from tech. Even I met somebody who actually went through TechStars, if you're familiar with that
Oh yeah.
accelerator,
Very
in,
familiar.
in Austin. They actually had somebody come through that did some type of high-end pool service, tech startup like
Venture
several years
backed?
ago.
Wow.
Techstars didn't end up like actually backing them, but they came out of the program and they said, "Oh, this was way too easy to like build a cash flowing business." And I don't know, there's like a deceptive allure about running a highly
Yeah.
efficient pool service operations company. So anyway, I mean, props to you and how you've grown it, and
Yeah. Thank
glad
you.
that the stuff is translated. So
Thank you. Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm still learning, right? And I think that there is a lot of that is true at a certain level. I think once you start creating, getting into the 250 routes, like it gets a little uncomfortable, and I think that's where most people start to get, oh, this is not as easy and lucrative.
yeah,
This becomes a little harder. But hey, so
yeah.
walk me through your past. You weren't always in pools, and I think it's really funny that your and my relationship has always been about pools. But this is a great opportunity for me to learn about what you did before this because you're
Yeah.
like super smart and you're applying all of this brilliance on the pool
I
industry.
appreciate it.
But talk to me about your grow. Yeah, how'd you grow up?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the most interesting pieces about me is I moved around a lot. My family, we moved around a lot, and it wasn't because my father was military, but wasn't military when we were moving. So I think for so many people today, and especially the younger generation, they almost like crave that kind of, let's experience something new. I think for closer from like your and I's generation, I think we're pretty close in age.
Yeah.
The it was not as common, I would say. I don't feel I've met as a bunch of people that moved as much as I did, but I've lived in Canada, Minnesota, Colorado, Utah, Texas. So I've been all over. Through my college years, like I got to live in Germany,
Oh,
spent a
wow.
lot of time in like France and Norway. So always like a big traveler. I think that's really lent itself though. The more that I've met I'd say gregarious and like conversational people, I also realize that they've had a very similar, almost kind of transplant background. They've just
Hmm.
been forced to like meet new people, right?
Hmm.
And so growing up, that was pretty natural, I think, for me, and I was kind of glad to grow up that way. Um, College-wise, like I said, I went to A&M. I was first generation Aggie, so if there are listeners that are
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how did you come into the cult following of of A&M?
Yeah.
I was first generation. The story behind that was I came to visit my sister during a summer visit, and my dad said, you can't have a complete waste of time. You need to actually go visit a university and like do something with your life. So I visited like UT, A&M, and I just decided like I don't know. I felt everyone was friendly, and A&M was kind of a cool place, and that. So did that. My I guess official saw as electrical engineer. I always I don't know. I was always drawn to I don't know, maybe like a bug. I always like lights. A lot of people like lights, LEDs, and
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that. It
Yeah.
doesn't make me sound smart when I say I'm like drawn to lights, but
No.
but no, I was always fascinated with robotics. My father was in robotics manufacturing. I thought it was always very cool how you could manipulate electricity, to do make these robots do stuff. So that was kind of the fascination, I think, early on, and then. I guess cool about me too. I got to work for Intel at the age of 16 as a computer pro. I don't know if you knew that about me
I
or
did not
not.
know about that.
Okay,
How'd you
so,
do
so so
that?
there's the child prodigy moment maybe of this whole
That's
interview.
crazy.
Yeah, so I grew up like high school years in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I was there, and at the time, I was fortunate. I was very blessed. I got to go to a good school, good kind of high school and everything. So it was my junior year of high school, and I saw this like thing posted on our bulletin board around VLSI design. And I don't know if you know what VLSI is. It stands for
Mm-mm.
Very Large Scale Integration.
Hmm.
But it's essentially chip design. And so I was like walking past, and at this time, mind you, I was like kind of interested in tech, but I would say not really. I was a fairly outgoing soccer player on the varsity team, kind of,
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, kind of more like I would say mainstream high schooler or whatever. But I saw this thing, and it was like, design microchips, and I thought it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I was like thinking about classes and stuff for the next year. So anyway, I decided to sign up and take this class. No idea what I was getting into. And so took the class. Turns out it was just the Intel was trying to, do well with the local community and stuff by like teaching. I don't know, big business,
It's like
corporate,
an
right? You always have to
outreach.
do
Yeah,
these
yeah.
outreach things. And
Yeah.
so it was actually credit. And so anyway, no idea. Took the final, handed the final in, and like 2 days later, like the boss or I guess he was my boss, but the professor of the class, like actually called me and was like, "Hey, you are one of the top three students in the class. We'd like to offer you an internship to come like design chips at Intel." And so I'm like, here you're thinking like, okay, Intel, you're like real philanthropist, but what you're really doing is getting like smart child labor to like come in and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but really was an amazing opportunity. So, like I said, I was in high school. They called, ended up going and working for Intel even before I like started college. Was doing chip design, programming,
Holy cow.
um, and then yeah, it was amazing. Like the first time at A&M, I went to the career fair, and you could imagine I'm like walking around with my resume where it's like 2 years at Intel as like a freshman while everybody's like still
Yeah.
taking. So anyway, it was one of these things where you can't almost like align the stars that way. You just have to get lucky. And of
Yeah.
course, I would say, sure. I mean, my mind is maybe smart in that sense. It just makes sense to me. So get it. But I feel super lucky because it set my career, I think, up almost differently than, let's say, 99% of
Totally
people.
does. Yeah.
Just lucky though. I mean, in a way, it's kind of luck. So,
Yeah, it's luck, but
but
it's also the fact that I mean, this is what I say when people tell me I'm lucky. I mean, I used to just kind of, say haha and just be humble about it. But now that I'm older and I don't care anymore, I just like go, no, there's no luck. I was ready for the opportunity and I was willing to take it when I hit
absolutely.
it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it sounds like you took the opportunity, you went for it,
Yeah, and took it and so did that through like even undergrad was really great. It got to work for, and back then that was like early 2000s, so Intel was still very Silicon Valley-esque. But learned so much, right? Learned so much about working with other engineers, developing products, developing chips, programming. I mean, who else gets to work for Intel from the age like 16 to
Nobody.
22?
Nobody. But you're also doing something that's completely different than electrical engineering. I mean, no, it's not completely. There's a tangent. It sounds like you were doing chip design, so it's mechanical engineering and software, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say it was more software than anything. And that's what really, I think, even now, for people that are interested in software, what really got me into it was like I could program something, a logic circuit, like you're not sitting there really dragging and connecting wires per se. You're writing actually a lot more code. At least back then, we were writing a lot more code to do chip design. I loved, and I think a lot of people that love programming, like this is their thing. You get like this instant gratification moment of like when you write code, then it happens, right? And so that's where I fell in love with like coding to hardware and then hardware back and forth. And so, yeah, so I think that's a really important part of my story is
It
like that really
is.
set like, the groundwork. And then, yeah, then I went off and grad schooled it. I do have a PhD from A&M.
What'd you
That's
get a
also
PhD in?
electromagnetics.
Electromagnetics. Wait, why? What's the magnetics part? I've never heard of that. It's usually just electrical engineering.
Yeah, so electromagnetics is the study of essentially electricity, magnetism, energy through space. So most people that come out of my field end up doing things like antenna design, or they'll
Oh
go
my god.
into like power electronics and design, transmission lines and these types of things. I think,
Awesome.
yeah, I mean, um, and that one was weird too. I just had a professor at that time that I really enjoyed working with, and that was his
Yeah.
specialty. And I thought antennas were pretty sweet. Like, I mean, but seriously, maybe no one else thinks this way, and it's just me. But I was always so fascinated by the fact that like you can have electricity on a wire,
Yeah.
and like magically that energy just like leaves this wire, goes through the air, gets captured by another wire somewhere over some distance, and then you're able to like put some signal or some like smarts on that electricity that turns into this like air electricity that then gets recaptured. Like the basis of it, I'm sure it's more complex than that, but the basis of that, man, and like what Tesla, Nikola did, and like all these guys, they figured it out 100 years ago without any of these tools. Like, man, I fell in love with that so much. I mean, it was like, how amazing is it to like study this phenomenon? I mean, so
Yeah.
I know I'm like the
So
super boring coffee person probably, but to
no,
me, like
I
stuff like this is fascinating
I
to
don't
me.
think that that's super boring at all. I love it. I think that that's fascinating that you got a PhD in electromagnetism. I didn't even know that PhD even existed. So it's like super exciting to even learn
Well,
more about it.
I didn't either. I just got like, what?
So then how did you go from that? Because you did tech. You actually did software,
Yeah.
like hardcore software development, right? Like you went to tech after that.
Yeah, well, and even then, I would say so during my PhD, and I think this is, if there's other listeners or folks that have PhDs in engineering, I think they'll totally resonate. Like most hardware stuff has actually been done, and it's been done since the 70s and 80s. Like there were the
Mm,
generation before us was like phenomenal in terms of, I mean, look at where we're at today as a
yeah,
society, right?
yeah,
I mean, all those folks laid the groundwork for the internet and .com boom and cell phones. Like they deserve a lot of
infrastructure.
credit. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
infrastructure. So it's very hard when you go into these fields to be and to get a PhD, you have to produce something novel, right? You have to kind of make
Innovate.
your name,
Yeah.
innovate. And so a lot of what's happening now is that people are combining software and hardware to, create new concepts or figure out how to do new things with existing hardware and innovate on that. And so I would say actually a lot of my software skills and development and tech really accelerated like through my PhD, simply because out of need to like, create something new. So what I focused on was I tried to get a bunch of drones. Like, have you seen like the Olympics, where all those
Yeah,
drones
yeah, they
have
have a show
flown
with the
around and
drones
like,
now.
yeah,
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 do all
yeah.
that. So like a lot of my research was probably behind that,
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
we were trying to figure out like wirelessly, like if these are all in like random positions, like how do they all kind of communicate together and work as like a team and all this. And so a lot of that needed to be studied and figured out, and
Tons of data, some
tons of
machine
data.
learning.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
a lot
lot
of
of heavy,
stuff.
heavy coding. Yeah.
So yeah, basically got done with that. And then the worst thing I say young about like leaving with that degree is like your only option is to go work for the DoD. The DoD is just like, oh, like American citizen, understands antennas and drones and stuff, like
Yeah.
come, work in DC.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, I'm patriotic, but I just can't. It's like it's,
Yeah.
it's like you look at like I don't know how much tech people make and what you get to work
Yeah.
on, and then working for the government. So anyway, yeah, I
Yeah.
ended
The
up
disparity is
doing.
way too high.
So I finished that like 2015, and then just did straight startups. So did an ed tech startup. That was my first like real venture. We gamified of all things antenna and circuit design. So that's kind of how I applied like what I was doing. So
Oh,
that was
cool.
pretty successful. Did that, and then we went into machine learning for oil and gas assets, and then got into the pool stuff. So yeah.
Jeez Louise, that's so wild. There's like almost like
Oh, it's like yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, what's crazy, what really blew my mind, and then the listeners don't know this because, we just had this conversation a couple weeks ago. You're now like getting into chemistry. You're like getting into like, like all this, like, I'm like sending you stuff. I'm like, hey, Jeff,
Oh
what
yeah,
am I
I
supposed to think about? Yeah, I'm like,
know.
hey, someone's talking about mineralization and technologies and oxidization. You're like, what do you think? And you're like, let me break this down.
But doesn't, I mean, even for you though, like I'm just finding, I think it's so true to like you can just learn anything from the internet now. I would
Yeah.
say like if you've learned good fundamentals, I don't know how like you are, but it's like if
Yeah.
you want to learn something new, it's like why not? Like who's gonna say you need a degree to? I mean, I know what your thoughts are on it,
Yeah,
but
it's a really good question. I mean, it's not really a question, but it's like it's a really good thought. I mean, I'm definitely not like you in the sense that like I think you have a propensity for collecting and synthesizing data at a very, very like organized and fast rate because the stuff that you have learned in mechanical engineering, electrical, software, and then now chemistry is like obviously very, very intelligent, and you have a high intellectual horsepower. But for me, it's more through people. So I have this thing. I
yeah,
have the rule of 100, or if I like, so I want to learn how to do real estate investing, and so what I do is I just interview 100 people that invest in real estate. And
interesting.
so, yeah, like I want to be a better parent and an entrepreneur. So what I do is I start a podcast and I interview 100 parents that are also entrepreneurs and ask them how they do it. Right. Like right now I'm interested in like what a private equity fund does, and how does that work? And so I'm in the process of interviewing 100 people in private equity, and I've got 9 under my belt and I got 91 more to go. But
Would you say is it more efficient than like reading books or like so, a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just like do Audible or read books. I mean, you find the interviewing to be
for me, it is. For me, it is, and I think it's because I don't do well when I like read something and I process it. It doesn't like register quickly for me. I need to
gotcha.
understand like the motivations that go around it, the context around it, like the different players in the sphere, and like what are the pushes and pulls, and I need to know like all the macros before I can actually process the micro. And it's really hard for me to like just jump into the micro and then understand what it is until I actually know what I'm playing in, what kind of field I'm playing in. And so
I guess, and maybe there's the opportunity as well. Like you get to keep asking why or pile on questions or that maybe you just don't get to do with books, I guess, right? I mean, that's part of the benefit.
yeah, and there's also like weird questions you can ask too, right? Like when you just ask a human being, it's like, do you like what you do? You know, like what's the best part of your job and what's the worst part of your job? Like I'm going to ask you in a few minutes here, like, you know, how do you qualify success, you know, in parenting? And, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to ask you these questions, and you really can't ask that in a book, right? Like there's just things that you can't ask that are actually more valuable data points than, you know, what you did to raise your kid to be, you know, good or successful. And so that's kind of how I think about it. But it's not like, I guess in that retrospective, I guess I feel like you're right. Yes, I think that things are learnable if you apply yourself, and it just is one of those things that I think that people should do more of.
Well, and I think, I mean, so somebody asked me just actually, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, you know, about 10 years younger than me, said, hey, you know, like I'm thinking about getting a PhD. What do you think you really learned from it? And I would say foundationally, I learned to be truth seeking. You're really trying to find the answer to this kind of unknown question. And so when you said, hey, you know, now you're learning chemistry, it's like I'm learning chemistry in a way, but I'm more fundamentally wanting to understand, like, how do pools actually work?
Yeah.
And so with like this essence of like, I think a lot of good entrepreneurs are just students of the game for so long, and then they recognize the like one or two insights that no one else sees. But it's just being that student, and then just being really like, there's a lot of like, as an example, you sent me that email like a week ago. You got that big printout that was like, hey, there's all this sanitization stuff. Like, give me your thoughts, Jeff. Right. Yeah. And it's like, if you just read headlines, or if you just kind of read like what everybody has kind of glossed over, you'll notice, I mean, in the literature you sent me, or if you even Google, there's very little of, hey, somebody like Fluidra did this study on like 100 pools and found that X, or we did blah, blah, blah and found X. It's like, I don't like hearsay, hypotheticals. Like, I think I'm very much about, you would describe it as learning chemistry. I would describe it as like, I want to be the absolute truth seeker into what is fundamentally the best way pools should work. Like it's like the difference. It's like the different framing though of the question.
It's so gangster. You know, when I talk about, when I talk about, other people, I'm like, I move fast and I'm so aggressive, but this guy is like 4 times more aggressive than I am. I'm like, this guy is just like, he makes me uncomfortable at how fast he moves. Cause I'm like, it is like unbelievable the way you think about things. The moment you latch onto a problem, you have like this little trigger that goes off in your brain, and you like have to solve it. You're just like,
I've got tunnel vision. It's I would say it's both it's a good and a bad trait. I would also say it's like, impacted times where I should have just like let something go, but instead I decided that.
Let's talk about that. Okay. I'm going to try to bring that over here. Let me ask you another question here.
Yeah.
When did you start having kids in your career journey here? So you went to PhD, went to startups, ed tech, and then you did the oil and gas tech. Then you did the pool thing. So when did you have kids in this transition?
Yeah. So first, girls, obviously be on the Girl Dad show. I think you have to wear that badge of honor, right?
Oh, you don't have to, but yeah, it's good that you do. Yeah.
Nonetheless. So my first girl, Avi or Avalyn, was born when I was at my second startup. But I would say from a timing perspective, we had already raised significant capital, was in a comfortable position, and so did that. But in the kind of the other side of that is I left that startup to go do the pool startup within like, I'd say, a year and a half. And so really having a very young baby girl at home, and just completely like, and I would say, have you written a book? Have you written a book yet in your journey? Okay.
I want
is it on your bucket list?
It is actually. Okay. I'm working on one right now. Good. But yeah,
I'm looking for. I would definitely read a book from you and your journey. But in my case, I did. I think I was maybe young and still stupid. You think I'm smart, but I'm stupid in a lot of ways too. I quit a very stable job. Really believed in this pool problem, quit salary, quit everything while I had a girl at home, went on Cobra insurance and I went hardcore, I would say. I mean, all the way. And looking back, it looks reckless, honestly, to me in a way. With having a daughter so young at home and my wife doesn't, I would say my wife works. She is the full-time mom, and that's probably the hardest job, being a full-time parent.
Totally is. Yeah.
But she did not have like a corporate or a source of income, and so we literally just quit income when I went to go when I went to go do the pool thing.
I
So
love it.
for anyone like watching this or listening, I've talked with a lot of folks where I love to be. One of my mentors and investors in my current company said, Jeff, no one ever wants to read a book about how easy it was for you to go conquer the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like that's always stuck with me that he said that is like, but anyways, that was one of the craziest, I think, things I did. So had Avalon there. And then Brielle is my second one. And had Brielle just 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago.
Wow,
She'll
that's
be
awesome.
2 in April. So yeah, not I would say not great timing while you're like building companies and having kids.
Yeah.
Is extremely difficult.
Totally no. My question to you is, I know you're saying that you felt like in hindsight it was reckless, but you knew you wanted to do it. What was the triggering point? What was that moment where you're just like, I'm going to do it, even fully knowing that I'm literally leaving a security, of pay, salary,
I know.
fully closed funding deal, it sounds like. You obviously had the thought process of security because you wouldn't even made that comment about, oh, we just closed a round of funding. Like, why would you even be saying that if you didn't think about that? You obviously
I know. Yeah,
consciously made that decision.
I
That's
did, and
crazy.
I think too. I mean, obviously I had to discuss it with my spouse too. I mean, my spouse, my partner. Looking back, it's hard to almost say like it was almost this thing of like, would I rather live with the fact that I did it and have a story, or would I rather live with regret that I never did it? And I think that was so powerful to me of like, I don't know. I don't really necessarily buy this phrase that like people don't live with regrets. I think like in some ways, like a lot of people like to say it, but in some ways, I think people always regret stuff that they do.
Yeah.
This was something where I just kind of said, if I don't do this now, and I was already a part of a startup. Like I was employee number 5 at the previous startup I was
Yeah. It's
doing,
already
and
inherently risky. Yeah.
it
Totally.
was it was it was already risky, and could I have been making more money elsewhere? Yes, and blah blah blah. But in this case, it was like the true, like I think almost ultimate risk, right?
Totally
And
is.
but it was something where I said, you know what, if I never do it, like right now, I don't know that I would again, because I think there's, maybe like you, I don't know if you and your partner decided, hey, this is the perfect time to have kids. I hear a lot
Yeah.
of people say there's never a perfect time. There's always excuses why you're not going to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I completely
and
agree. I
so,
mean, in
yeah,
hindsight, I think that I tried to find reasons and like I created a lot of reasons in perfect timing situations. And in hindsight, I wish I had started earlier because there was never a perfect time. I
there's
wish I
just,
started earlier so I could have more, right? Like, yeah.
but
So,
And so now I would say though, with that decision, and it's happened. So like I left big corporate, did the first ed tech startup, which I thought was already kind of like risky, although we had some seed fundings, was kind of secure in a way. And that led to like getting involved in accelerators and starting to meet people in more of an entrepreneur kind of mindset. That led me to joining then full time as like CTO of a venture backed startup, which then really got me started to get plugged in even deeper in an ecosystem. I will say though, Young, making that big jump, and basically one phrase my dad told me that always sticks with me is like the hungriest dog hunts best, right? And I think making that jump to where you have nothing and the fire is just totally under you to make something happen. If you want to know like why you think I move fast, I think it's because like I think I've taken some of the ultimate risks that some people would never take. And I've lived through that and experienced that. And that's kind of like really then now brought me to, who I am today. Right.
God, I love that saying, man. That's a good way of saying it. My dad said something very similar.
Okay.
He basically said it in a way that said, it was not so nice and succinct, so I'm gonna have to steal yours.
Sure.
He basically said, it's not about how good looking you are. It's not about how smart you are. The winning only matters how bad you want it. Like if it takes you 10 times longer than the smarter person to do it, you could still beat that person because you'll work 10 times harder. It literally comes down to what are you willing to sacrifice and how bad do you want it. That's all it is. And so when you don't succeed in business and you don't succeed in life, you just didn't want it bad enough. And I don't know if he's just being an asshole to me because he wanted me to be like tough and rough, but like that has always stuck with me. And so whenever I fail something, I'm like, I didn't want it bad enough, because I'm like, I could have stayed up later. I could have worked harder. I could have ate less. I could have worked longer. I could have sacrificed this. I could have sacrificed that. But like, it really like puts the onus on me to win and be hungry. And it's really funny meeting someone like you that's even makes me feel uncomfortable because you're more aggressive than I am. But I have that same mentality and mindset,
I mean, I wanted to ask you a question. So, I don't know if you listen to Joe Rogan stuff, if you like him or not. We don't have to discuss that.
I do, yeah. I like him. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
But he's got a couple. He's got one where he says, hey, you learn more from your failures than successes.
Totally.
Do you think that's true?
I think so. I think that you do learn a lot from your failures and definitely learn more from your success. I mean, for me, for sure, I learn more from my failures than my successes. Once I succeed, I'm happy very short term and I just move on. Where my failures, I fester on a lot and I unpack and I try to resolve and try to figure out how to optimize it or fix it or adapt it, right? And I spend a lot more time on that, where like successes are like, it's cool, but like I feel good for like, I don't know, a month, maybe, 30 minutes sometimes, and then I kind of move on where I think like failures, I fester on a long time. And I think it's like, for me, it's not about winning. It's the fear of losing that drives me.
Interesting.
Like, yeah. So I hate losing. So I'm not really competitive because I don't need to be a winner, but I also just hate losing. And I just like, drives me.
It's interesting. I've heard that before. I love this poster of, I think there's definitely two types of entrepreneurs that end up winning, and neither of them is wrong. But I love, at least, like, I have it used to be a poster, now a picture. Do you remember in the World Cup, or not the World Cup, sorry, the Olympics, where Michael Phelps was swimming against this South African guy? And so there's a very famous picture of they were neck and neck, gold medal. And basically the South African guy is like looking at Michael Phelps, and Michael Phelps is looking at the wall, and Michael Phelps ends up winning.
Yeah.
And I love that picture. It's driven me so much. It's because like, even when I started this pool thing, and you've been in business where you have competitors. Oh, yeah. I used to, when I started the pool company, I used to care so much about what my competitors were doing, and was like, I outdoing them and beating them and like all this other stuff. And then like I got to that picture, and it's been so influential in my life, just like seeing, I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of Michael Phelps either way. I mean, he's great gold medalist.
Yeah, it's the message. American. Yeah. It's not
but the message of like now just being focused on your own thing and just trying to like win that way. And I think when you take ownership that like it's only you that's going to win or lose, I think that's when you learn the most, right?
I love that. And I think that's actually really interesting, because I have a very similar lesson that I learned from a Simon Sinek talk, where he was giving a speech about like how he was coaching Microsoft employees, and they were talking about like how they need to keep up with Apple and what Apple was doing this and monitoring that stuff. And then he went and got a consulting contract with Apple, and they were talking about the customer and what the customer needed and the future of the product and the industry. And it's like, it's really interesting that like Apple's focused on just beating themselves, right, with the customer, and Microsoft's focused on beating Apple. And, that little message really did the same thing for me, where I'm like, I just got to play my own game. I just got to win my own thing.
I would say neither strategy is wrong, though, in a way. I mean, the world actually needs both. I think the world needs both in that sense. So anyway,
it's a really good way to look at it. That's a good point. Yeah. It does need both. Yeah, neither strategy is wrong. You're absolutely right. Can I ask you how you think about because your kids are super young, but do they know what you do for a living? Have they ever asked?
Yes. So, well, at least my oldest one definitely does. So I've got all sorts of widgets at my pool, and so her favorite thing though is like when the water is like low at my pool. We have this sort of like smart refill valve that has like I can control it from my phone too, but there's a button, and she loves to push the button. So I say, Daddy makes all this stuff that like keeps the pool running, and so she loves to swim. Like we were in there like so, tons of days during the summer, and so she
Yeah.
definitely knows that like daddy makes stuff for the pool, and like makes it
That's
so that the
awesome.
pool's like clear and all that. But I think the negative side is like my wife and I are talking about this. I'd be interested to ask a question to you back is this year. So she's turning 5 in a couple of months.
Nice.
Um, and it was really this year when she was 4 that she noticed how busy, I think this is probably true for most entrepreneurs, right? Is like how busy your lifestyle
Yep.
is. And
Hmm.
this was like really the first year where she was like vocal about it.
Oh, she
Um,
she told you that she wanted more time, or got it?
yeah, I mean, just that, like, oh, is that like, at night she'll say, at bedtime, oh, is daddy going back to work or, stuff like this. And so it's so interesting when you like, with the innocence of a child, and they don't know, like, they have no
Yeah,
idea, they have no
that's right.
concept of the whole thing except
That's
for
right.
just that daddy works.
Yeah.
And just, like after bedtime asking, oh, are you going back to work? So that's been weird for me this year, I would say, is like, the negative side of like knowing what I do is she knows that I work a lot, right? To that
Yeah.
extent. So, but
Yeah.
what about you?
But
Your kids, they know roughly what you do, or
kind of. I mean, not really. I also do so many things, right? Like,
yeah,
my prop. I'm you're the same way, but I think I have quite a few more projects than you do. So, obviously, you're further along in each one of yours. But I did you did the narrow
yeah,
and
yeah.
deep. I went the wide and shallow. So I have quite a
Both
few
both both
projects.
strategies again. Both strategies can win. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it's working for me. It's going well, but it's harder to explain the scope of what I do, right? And so it's harder to do that. So, but I do know that they think it's funny. They think I just like talk to people for a living, and I hear that a lot. Like you push things on the keyboard and you talk to people, and so that's what you do. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And they do ask, they do think that I do a lot with the pool, which is cool because that's the one business that
nice.
I do run that they actually can grab onto. Like they
Yeah,
understand it, right? They're like, oh, you help clean pools, right? And I'm like, oh, perfect. So you understand one of the things that I do, so that's awesome.
yeah,
So that's been really fun because they swim in it and they know it, they understand it. I take them to the company parties, like so they're
yeah.
like around it, and so they actually can like see it, where like a real estate deal or like a digital marketing agency is not like something that's easily explainable to a 5-year-old, like
Yeah,
how does
yeah,
that
yeah,
work?
for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. So like some of these things are a little more complex, but yeah, that's really interesting that we have the same age kids. Like before I answered, like I would love to hear how you're thinking about success. So now that you have this one kid that's starting to ask you about the time and attention for
Yeah.
work, what are you thinking about parenting? Like, how do you think about parenting and the success of being a successful parent?
Man, that's a strong question. You saved like the deepest question for
I
last.
know. I'm
So
sorry, man. I'm
let's
sorry.
hope
That's
let's
what.
hope everyone's survived our story so far to hear like the real nitty gritty of this.
Yeah.
Um, I was always taught big. For my parents are phenomenal. Love them. Thank God they're still both alive. They taught me like true success in life comes from like the 3 F's of like faith, family, friends. That at the end of the day, what you do for work, how much money you make, what school you go to, your education, like that's kind of aside. I think for me, success, is being able to spend enough time with my girls to at least impart on them like what my parents imparted on me, which was like the importance of at least I won't get religious, as I say right now on the show, but at least to have faith or belief in something, like at
Yeah.
least ground yourself, so that that I think one of the worst things to go through life just as an individual or as a human being is to have no belief or no faith in anything. Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of ultimate despair, right? Is if you're walking around and you have no faith in anything. I think those people are, some of probably the saddest people today, right? Or belief in anything. And so I think really establishing and helping to establish like what someone's belief in anything or faith in anything, and whether that's humanity or whether it's a God or a religion or whatever, I think that like there's this kind of soulful part of a person that's extremely important, and for you to be a part of that
I
as
love
as a
that.
as a
Yeah.
parent is extremely important. So however that ends up, I just think my line of success there is like being able to, and I want my kids to make their own decisions in regard to, especially religion or that belief. But I think that especially having daughters, a belief and I think it's going to be crazier by in 10 years from now when our kids are older that like I think the next Instagram or whatever these kids are getting lost into and trying to be beautiful or create the most content and all that, like it's leading to I don't want to bash Instagram, but like a belief in yourself that you have to be the prettiest or you have to have the most likes or something, I think is devastating on so many kids today. And so, anyway, I just hope that I can be a part of like really establishing a good foundation on like the faith belief side as number one. Number two is I actually set a goal for last year and this year. So this year I'm trying to beat the goal. It's how many nights can I be home for dinner? I think it's a good metric. I really, I like to have things that are measurable. And I think so I come home, go put my phone on the charger, take my Apple Watch off, and I'm just at the dinner table. I'm present, having dinner, trying to, even if I've had a rough day. And so for me, I think keeping track of like, because I want to, not just to like hit a number, but like being there for family. And I think dinner time is like one of those things that's, because in the morning everyone's got school and you're going and all this and lunch, that's why dinner, at least for us, kind of this like sacred time where like at the end of the day, everything's calming down. So how many dinners can you make? At least so that's kind of a near term success, but family wise, like being able to, whether it's dinner or kids sports or that attendance, I think is a big deal. And then, the friends piece, I think for me is like, this is maybe where the job comes in is like, can I provide enough so that they get to go to a decent education, make decent friends, enjoy life, grow up in, kind of a decent surrounding. So I don't know. I mean, just kind of riffing, that's like where I am grounded on like what true
That's beautiful,
success
man.
is in a parent, man. So what about you? I mean,
That's beautiful, man. I don't want to follow that, and it's my show, so
no?
I'm not going to
Okay.
answer
Okay.
it. That was beautiful, man. I love it. I think that's a really good way of looking at it, and it's probably one of the most clever ways of defining success as a parent. I mean, it's so simple and eloquent, but yet so like profound. I think it's really incredible, and in a lot of ways, I think I share the same sentiment. I mean, we go to church. We raise our kids in church, and we also have a heavy focus on family and dinners, especially.
Yep.
But we also try to do other like family activities. Like we have the family dinner thing, but we're also like, how many family vacations can we take? We've
Okay.
added that to that level. And then on the friend side, I love that you just said like, who are they hanging out with, and how can you socialize and help them have good friends. But I've also been very active in being conscious of what friends I have, so that they're also permeating through my family ecosystem. And so it's really funny that you just said it that way. It's probably the most elegant way of saying what I've been trying to articulate over the last 6 to 9 months here. So I may actually title your episode Faith, Family, and Friends. That's actually really
Go
cool.
for it. Yeah,
That's
you should
pretty
go
dope.
for it.
Yeah, that's pretty dope, man. I love that. That was great.
I mean, I gotta again thank my dad and my mom because that was like their mantra, and I think, I'm just really fortunate so many people don't get to say they, lived a life where either both parents were together or, they had a more complicated situation. And I think
Yeah.
honestly, at the end of the day, I just feel super blessed that, I mean, it takes away so many struggles of a life that a kid, would have, right? So, anyway, it seemed to work for them. I'm borrowing it. So
Yeah.
probably they got it from somebody else. So we'll just pay it forward, right? But
Yeah, it
yeah,
works, right? It works, and it's
yeah,
a good system, and I think that's a good barometer for success, man. Hey, I do want to be cognizant of your time. Can you stay on for a couple minutes after the
yeah,
hour?
definitely.
Okay,
All
great.
good. I'm good.
I do want to, because I want to ask you my rapid fire questions. So I ask every guest the same 5 questions, and so there's, even if the conversation goes into pools or whatever, it always comes
All
back
right.
to the same. Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
symmetry to each episode, right? So let me fire those off, okay? What advice do you have for other parents and soon-to-be parents?
Forget about sleep. Like
Oh my God.
if you like nap time, just forget about it. Just like become numb to it. Just realize you're never gonna sleep the same again. I think,
Truer
yeah.
words have never been spoken. Yes, there you go. I love it. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
I'd say I would have invested more money. Like I would have been, I think, more focused on like financial literacy even earlier. I think it's much more difficult to like make financial, especially more risky financial sacrifices when you have kids, because now you're kind of thinking about, okay, like if this risk doesn't play out, then it's going to have a greater impact. So I would have taken like more financial risk, I think, earlier on.
Wow, that's awesome. That's very interesting. Let's talk about that later when we're
Okay.
hanging out at your house in Houston and
Yeah,
our
yeah,
kids are
yeah.
swimming. Let me pick your brain on that one because that's
All
actually
right.
something that I've been struggling with a lot too. That's really interesting because my wife does full-time mom as well, and so it's been harder to be an entrepreneur because now it's not just me risking my food and my money. It's like I'm risking like four mouths. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's been really interesting. That's really cool. I'm gonna make a mental note. I'm gonna follow up with
Yeah.
that. All right. So the next question is, what is the most surprising thing that you have learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
Most surprising thing. Uh, I was more surprised about how little patience I had.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. My whole life I've been I can be fairly like animated in conversation with good friends and having a good time, but I'm more so a very stoic, very straight line person. I thought I had a lot of patience. Then man, you have kids and it's like, holy cow,
Yeah.
you see a different side of yourself that you're like, where
Yeah.
did this come from? Like, I learned that like I really needed to work on how much patience that I have, like as an individual, as a person. I think, yeah,
Wow. That's awesome, man. That's really cool.
it's
I
kind
love
of a
that you
bad
were.
one, kind of a bad one, but it's
No,
honest. So.
honesty is the best thing ever because the reality is that I think a lot of us realize that and just it's really good to hear it and it's really refreshing because it makes me feel good about it too because it's something that I also struggle with and I'm like, okay, now I feel a lot more normal than because I feel like I'm like the chill dude. I'm like the chill Bay Area guy, right? I'm like,
Oh
hey, I'm
yeah.
totally laid back and then I'm like I have kids and I'm like so stressed out. I'm like, why won't you listen? And like, what is going on?
Well, and then I don't know, you kind of feel like you're alone, or I see like the one dad with four kids who's like playing out in the yard and like has everyone like climbing on him and like
Yeah.
people like gunning him in the face. I'm like, yeah, I'll never be that dad. Like, I'm just like, I just like, I mean, I don't know, there's certain dads that have that level of
That's so funny.
tolerance.
That's so
Yeah,
funny. Cool beans. Let me go keep moving forward here.
sure.
So to switch gears from the kids to business, what's your favorite business book?
Ooh, I'd say The Millionaire Next Door.
Holy sh! I just got that middle of last year, and I like set it aside because the Ray Dalio came out, and then I had to read that one first. But yeah, someone told me to read that. They're like,
Yeah.
because they heard of the pool service business, and they're like, oh, Millionaire Next Door, and I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, dude, you got to read the Millionaire Next Door. You didn't read that? That's why I thought you
Yeah.
started the pool service business, and I'm like, no.
No. Okay. Yeah, I think it makes you. I mean, it's an older book. It's not like recent, right? It's been
No,
around
it's old.
for
It's really old.
yeah, a
Yeah.
while. Um, I think it just like really rings true about. Look, I think a lot of business, especially as I'm like growing older and I'm making more, same as you, right? Making investments in business and looking at opportunities differently. The Millionaire Next Door teaches a really interesting practice around if you can keep your lifestyle to a minimum in most things, you can invest and capitalize on the opportunities like when they come along. And
Mm.
so for the people that live a high, like if you're always chasing that next car and if you're always getting in a bigger house and your mortgage keeps multiplying and all this, it's like it's fine. You can live that way. But a lot of these millionaires next door are the people that, are like, hey, I'm gonna stick in this like smaller house for another while longer. And instead of, whatever upgrading, I'm gonna like place a bet on buying a pool service business and like
Yeah.
seeing that through. So to me, it was more like life changing in the sense of have dry powder, be a steward, a student and a steward of your cash, but student of like opportunities as they come, and then have the cash and be able to pounce on stuff when like other people living, let's say, a higher lifestyle can't, and like you'll get your day, right? You'll get your day with the the big house if you wanted to. Get your day with whatever, right? So it's influential. It's a good book.
Cool. I'm going to read it now, man. That makes me even more excited to read it because I just had someone send it to me and told me to read it. So I read it because I didn't even know there was a book like that. And so now this is a sign that I need to get it back on my reading list. So I'm going to
That's a good one. Yeah.
Cool. And then to bring us home, when you're not learning how to do chemistry, and building robots and mechanics for pools and being a super dad and trying to work on your time and dinner with the kids, what do you do for fun? What does Jeff do for downtime? What's Jeff time look like?
Well, before COVID, I was actually, and I really I don't have the body type. I'm a bit more like of a built muscular dude, but I was really into triathlon and Ironman. I loved the travel, the training, being outside, running. But now, I guess having a couple of kids, I realize, and look, if you have a triathlete on the show that has 3 kids, I'm gonna listen to it 4 times, but how they still manage to do it. I miss the sport so much, but you can't dedicate that amount of time to training. So at least right now, I'm spending good, gym routine, trying to just lift weights, stay in shape. So I enjoy that. I guess. I don't know. The other thing is I'm just trying to spend, more time with other entrepreneurs. Not everything has to be cash transaction, right? I'm helping a couple of buddies who are first time, entrepreneurs trying to start a business, trying to just help them. For me, it's more fun. It's not really I'm not expecting anything out of it. I'm not taking equity. I'm just really just trying to help.
It's fun. That's your hobby. Yeah. That's feeding your heart.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say those are probably, 2 of the bigger things. And then I've always been a big linguist, although, do you speak any other languages?
Yeah. I speak Korean and very, very rudimentary Spanish. How about you?
Oh man, Korean's epic. It's a super difficult language. Yeah, I would say I'm good in German and French.
Oh wow, those are 2 wildly different ones, right? Phonetically and structurally, those are very different. Yeah.
Correct. But I've always been a huge fan of Duolingo from the beginning, and so I guess I used to be much more religious about it in terms of checking in, but I do love language learning just for the fun of it. Trying to pick up new stuff. So anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool. That's actually a really, really interesting hobby. That's awesome, man. Because you could do that even when you're flying for work or doing whatever.
Exactly. So I would say, I'm fluent in French and German, and then dabble in probably Spanish, Italian, and Norwegian, just from different.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome!
And ventures.
You're one of those people I love to hate. I hate to love. I love to hate. I don't know. You're just oh my god, it's amazing. I freaking love it. I love it so much. It's so awesome. Jeff, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience getting to interview you today and learning more about you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
You have so much more depth than just pools. So I'm really, really grateful for you taking the time to share a little bit about your family, your history, and how you're thinking about life and family and I'm sorry, faith, family, and friends. We even have the whole terminology. Yeah, faith, family, and friends. Yeah, and I really appreciate you taking the time, man. It's been really great.
Awesome. I appreciate you having on, and let's do it again.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk soon, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Take care. Thank you again for listening to The Girl Dad Show. To help our show grow, please let us know who we should interview next by filling out the form on our website or commenting below.